So we have this rickshaw, which is helping us to sort subject from object.
Separate the self.
So that we can begin to realize through negation our true nature.
Right.
Okay. So as part of that, as we eliminate the objects, we come to the awareness that there is great silence, emptiness, and peace. Now, we associate those symptoms with consciousness.
That's right.
So we perceive the peace, the silence, the emptiness. And ultimately, we assume that that's the consciousness. Now, that could be considered the personal sense of consciousness, because ultimately, somewhere along the way, this is what dawns to us. Who's perceiving the silence?
Yeah.
It's the same thing again. So it's
if the silence is a perceived object,
right,
then it's not self.
Right.
But the silence is a very valuable object. In other words, it's the means whereby we are able to identify the self.
Okay, now, I've been told that there are three kinds of silence. There's the silence of the world, the physical world, which is never completely silent. There's always a helicopter going over, or cricketing, or whatever it is. There's the silence of the mind, which is never complete, because there's always a thought arising, or something going on in terms of bodily sensation or something like that. And then there is the absolute silence, which is what we enter as we go through the gateless gate.
Yeah, and if it's something you enter, it's something that isn't available all the time. It's a state of mind. And so when the mind is purely sattvic, in other words, when there's very little activity in it, then you feel this presence of awareness, this silence.
Right.
And most people take that to be the self. Well, it is the reflection of the self in a sattvic mind.
This is beautiful. This is the first time I think I've ever really gotten what you mean by the reflection of the self in the mind.
In the quiet mind.
Because we're now experiencing the symptoms of the self, which would be peace, happiness, silence, emptiness, fullness, the whole range.
Right.
But somewhere along the way, we have an awakening that someone is perceiving this.
That something or someone.
Something or someone. Which gets into this whole idea of the primal person.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, this is the key. Okay. This is the key. This is the step from personal to impersonal, perhaps, which is that now becoming aware that what I am is observing the silence, or I wouldn't be able to experience it.
Oh, I know it, yeah.
And that because I am experiencing it, I am something other than that. And so therefore, I lose the identity of the silence and become nothing but the awareness, which has no identity at all, which is completely impersonal.
Yeah.
It
isn't silent, nor is it not silent. In Vedanta, the trick with Vedanta, there's a very simple way to solve all the problems in spiritual problems, both on the physical, psychological, and on the spiritual level. In other words, on the level of these subtle experiences, these mind-blowing, beautiful, transcendent kind of experiences. And that is this: to ask yourself, how do I know what I know? This is why Vedanta is a means of knowledge.
Right.
This is the inquiry. How do I know what I know?
And is it really true?
Well.
Yeah, but how do I know it?
How do I know it is necessary. Right now, people always report these, in the spiritual world. I get emails regularly, people reporting these amazing experiences where their intellect and their mind and emotions and their body was really out of the picture.
Right.
There was something really going on there, some beautiful, transcendent experience taking place there. And usually they think that that is what's called the self.
And they've arrived, right?
And they've arrived, and now they're experiencing this wonderful thing. Right?
Right.
And then Vedanta says, okay, very good, excellent. Now you're in the right place to ask that. Keep asking that question. How do I know the blank mind? How do I know, the resolved
mind? Beyond
mind?
the blank mind.
Yeah.
How do I perceive what's going on here? Right. Who is perceiving?
Who is seeing it? That's right.
So now you're calling that the Uttama?
Well, in the Bhagavad Gita, there are many words for it. But in the Bhagavad Gita in chapter 15, it's referred to as the Uttama Purusha.
Uttama Purusha. This happens to be chapter 15 of the Bhagavad Gita, which we just happen to be reading about cutting with the great sword the roots of the tree.
Yeah, the root of the tree of samsara with the sword of dispassion. You get the dispassion, what? From doing the discrimination.
Right.
Dispassion arrives out of discrimination. You separate the objects from the subject, and that makes you dispassionate toward the objects. You see that the objects are not real. They're changing, and they're objective, and they're not me. Right. And then you lose interest in them. You no longer care.
And that what I am is not conditioned upon the objects.
It's not. It's free. That's what freedom is.
That's the illusion that keeps us in desire and aversion.
Absolutely.
It's the belief that that is what gives us the happiness.
Right.
Or the lack of happiness.
And spiritual people are usually subtle people insofar as they're looking for this kind of amazing fix that comes when your mind is really pure or really sattvic or really still in the satsangs, in the meditations, in the prayers, in worship, and various other activities. The mind will resolve itself in this way to its pure root or to its pure state. And then usually they stop inquiring at that point because their whole notion of enlightenment is experiential.
Right.
But Vedanta says, okay, very good. Now you're experiencing the silence. Now you see the emptiness. Now you experience non-duality and you see no separation between yourself and everything else. How do you know that?
Right. So there is the experience of the self, which is a reflection of the self within the mind. And yet something is perceiving that.
Absolutely.
That you can't argue with that logic. Something is perceiving.
Something. That's right.
Okay, so ultimately,
and you can't negate,
what is perceiving that?
And that thing that's perceiving, knowledge is something you can't negate. If it's true, you can't negate it. Right. You can never throw it away. So this something that's perceiving whatever it is, the subtle spiritual states, psychological states, or the physical activities, right? That something cannot be negated.
Right. So,
and that's me. What? Me. Right. Awareness.
And that is, at that point of peeling the onion, that's where we discard the individual sense altogether.
Absolutely. Now, there's one more stage.
And really, all characteristics are lost.
All characteristics are lost. All qualities.
Right.
All properties, all characteristics.
Your analogy the other day of electricity as being ultimately what we are is as good a description as I can think of.
As any, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Now there's one more stage. Once I've realized that.
The Uttama. The Uttama.
Yeah. Ut means like.
Yeah. Ultimate.
Ultimate. It's like that. The ultimate, the Uttama, the biggest, the highest, the greatest. Now, there's one more state. And you say, okay, now I've realized the self, now I'm enlightened, now I know who I am. Well, there's one more thing that needs to be done. All of these objects that I've negated.
Yeah, this is the final. The final now is the awareness that Atman is Brahman, and that
all those things that I said were not me are also me.
Now, okay, so how do we come to that? I am now that from which everything else arises.
And as in this chapter of the Gita, all of that Maya, it says, is rooted in Brahman.
Well, it has to be, doesn't it?
It has to be.
Because we've already determined in our examination of the boundaries of consciousness that there is no boundary to consciousness. And so everything that I experience is experiencing within me. Consciousness is not within the body. Consciousness is not within the earth. Consciousness, the entire universe has to be within me. Okay?
Yeah, so, and there's nothing other than consciousness. It's non-dual.
Now, so the last thing is that all this negation ultimately brings you back to the final thing, which is
an affirmation. Now I have to affirm all this stuff as myself.
An ultimate affirmation, right? The final step is an affirmation.
That's right. And then there's just one more little understanding that needs to be solid there, and that is that even though it's all me, I am still not it.
Yeah.
In other words, all these objects...
This is the classic thing that you keep doing, which I think is hard for people to understand when you say...
Yeah, this is a very subtle thing.
I know my hand, but my hand does not know me.
Yeah, exactly.
This is the statement of Krishna.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right.
All these means the whole universe is in me.
Right.
I am not in it.
Right.
I am not caught in this body, mind, intellect bundle. Mm-hmm. This body, mind, intellect bundle is an object in awareness, in me.
Right.
Right. So that finishes it. I see.
So that's a hard one. That's a hard one.
That's the ultimate. That's why it's hard to conceive. And you can't you can get it intellectually, but actually you have to experientially go through these realizations.
Yeah.
First of all, disassociating yourself from the objects, then identifying with the subject,
right.
Then taking back the objects that you've thrown away as the self, and then understanding what the relationship is between the pure self and the self in the form of objects. And that's called moksha. Because then you won't expect anything out of the objects that they can't deliver. Because they're insentient.
Right. But they are my creation.
They are, yeah. It's like a dream. In a dream, you appear in a dream, your body and mind, and you're talking and so forth and so on. And you're there observing that dream. That's why the dreamer is called sejasa. But when you look at yourself in the dream, and you see that yourself is in a pickle in the dream, and you think to yourself, now please turn left here and go right there and then hide in the basement, because that's the solution to your problem. That self in the dream doesn't get it. Why? Because even though it looks like it's real, even though it's thinking and feeling and acting and doing all these things, and emotions and all that stuff is there, just like it is in the waking state, it's not getting the communication. Why? Because it's just inert. It's insentient. It's not conscious. It seems to be conscious. And the interface between what's alert and conscious and aware and what's unconscious and unaware, it's so subtle and so fine that it's easy to confuse it.
And no different in the waking state than the dream state.
Same. So from the self's point of view, the waking state and the dream state are just objects. So the things that are operating in both those states are equally what? Unreal.
So the dream state teaches us the reality of the waking state. Because we have this phenomenon, which is that we perceive the waking state as more real than the dream state.
Yeah.